Everybody, this is Radio Free Mormon. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. I am joined by my very competent co-hosts, Bill Reel and Rebecca Biblioteca. Good evening to the two of you.
Good evening.
We have got so many stories tonight. We really better just get started. Before we start with the stories, I think that Rebecca has a report about what was going on 1 week ago on a night just like tonight.
Oh, I just thought it would be really nice to give a big thank you to everybody who attended the live Mormon newscast and also watched from home and helped out. We just had a huge crew that made it all happen, and it was really fun. I've never done anything like that. Did you guys have a good time doing that?
I had a wonderful time, especially that entrance.
Yes, this picture is really interesting. It is not photoshopped. There was an entrance that was above where we were sitting. And I just kind of thought this picture sums up like the newscast and our dynamic, because there you have me. I'm struggling with the tech. Bill is trying to shove the earphones onto my head. And I'm like,
Bill was trying to strangle you from behind.
It could be that, or give me a blessing. I don't know what was happening. And then you have Radio Free Mormon, which it just struck me. He looked like he was maybe a little devil on Bill's shoulder right there, but not photoshopped at all.
I assure you, I am encouraging Bill to do only good things.
I would hope so. And then this other picture I thought was very nice. We were standing there, all three of us, and I posted that with a big thank you. And I love that Joseph Smith weighed in and said, a set of assholes. That's always nice to hear. So I own it.
Well, it's nice to know. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me.
That's what I think. Yeah, me too.
And that's Joseph Smith. I think that's the crazy man who does the Jib Jab Fun videos of us.
I thought maybe it was Joseph Smith. I don't know. In which case he might not be a fan of everything we have to say. So I get it.
Okay. So thank you really from the bottom of my heart to everybody who did come out, and also for the Saturday night before. What a wonderful time I had in Utah. I had a great time meeting everybody and talking with you and eating with you, and in some cases singing with you. But I hope to do it again sometime soon. Bill?
The thing I would just want to add here, and you mentioned it, Rebecca, but there were a lot of people who helped us out on all, the Saturday night, the Monday night, and helping with venues, helping with food. Wendy was a big help. Teresa was a big help. We had folks helping with the technology behind the scenes. We had folks who helped us get into the place and set up on Monday night.
It was the temperature at the right level.
Yeah. So just thank you to everyone. There were probably 15 people on some level who helped put all that together.
Yeah.
And a big thank you to all of you who did that. Landon was there helping. John Lundwall was there assisting. I mean, it was just a really cool thing. So thank you to everybody who did that.
Yes, thank you, Bill. And I wanted everybody now to know that I'm really, really impressed with Bill Reel, because I have been working today on these stories. Actually, part of my worked on before today, but the main story I worked on today. And then I was working on our guest for this Wednesday's Mormonism Live. Lauren Matthias is going to be here, and had a wonderful conversation with her. She was available to talk by phone. And what was that I was going to say? Oh, yes. And Bill, we're meeting like 10 minutes before this show, the newscast, and Bill's sort of looking at something. I don't know what he's looking at, but he's doing something. He's asking questions, and they seem, related to Earth and space and time and everything. But then I find out that what he's doing is, within 10 minutes of starting this podcast, he's putting together the thumbnail for next week's, this 2 days from now, Mormonism Live. And then he flips it over and he shows it to me, says, what do you think? And I said, it looks great. And then I gave some suggestions. And then he starts working on it again. I said, Bill, you are the hardest working man in show business. That's what I wanted to let everybody know.
Oh, RFM's lying, but thank you. Thank you so much.
Did I describe anything inaccurately in what I said?
That was all accurate. What you didn't tell the audience was the 3 hours today that after all of the move into Cedar City, Utah, I just moved recently to a home in Cedar City. And then right after we got done with the move and we were exhausted, it was Teresa and I did most of that moving. Then suddenly, we had the Salt Lake City thing and the events there. And today was sort of the first day after getting back and getting equipment all set back up, doing the Mormonism After Dark on Friday night. This was the first day I had a full day where I'm like, I don't have anything to do. And so I'm not telling you about the 3 hours I played first-person shooter video games today. So I was not working all day long. I wasn't working it to the bone, but I did have a lot of fun working on Wednesday's show and tonight's show, which I think is great as well.
I hope those kind of video games are approved by your probation officer.
Yeah, they don't require anything that I'm not allowed to do. So there are some things I'm not allowed to do, but that's not one of them.
Okay, that's good. That's good. All right, well, let's go ahead and put up, if I can try and find this.
Yep.
There we go. Here's the top stories for tonight's show. Utah senator changes child sex abuse. That's what the CSA stands for. Utah senator changes CSA law favoring relative ? Question mark's important because that's what all the hubbub's about, and we'll get to that in a second. That'll be my story. Second story, Aaron Sherinian finally speaks out, sort of. Fair conference review. The apologists got together and rubbed their mojo. Psychedelic Church gets its day in court. Tattoos, then and now. Law firm dedicatory prayer. And finally, LDS land grab in Australia. So that was after that. And here it is, okay? This is what's going on, and it's causing a big furor and a lot of controversy in Utah, in the highest level of the politics there in the state. So I did a lot of research on this. I read a lot of articles, and I finally got my head around it. A lot of what I have here in these slides is my original writing as opposed to just copying and pasting, because I thought that it could be improved upon. This is somewhat complicated. It's not when you understand it, but that's the way with everything, right? It's complicated until you understand it. So what I want to try and do is explain to you what's going on, the role that this individual, Adams, who is in the Senate, I think he's the president of the Senate in Utah, used his office to help out a relative, all right? And whether what happened constitutes abuse of power. There's a lot of people saying that it does. There's other people saying it doesn't. And there's really a huge furor about it. So let's see what happened, okay? J. Stewart Adams, that's the guy's name, is the president of the Senate in Utah in 2023. Now, so this story is going to go over these years. Important things will happen in 23, in 24, and also in 25 this year. In 2023, Adams had a step-grandchild who was 18 years old and in high school, who was charged with 2 counts of rape of a child and 2 counts of sodomy on a child, both first-degree felonies. And all this, he got these charges after having sex with a 13-year-old. So 18-year-old having sex with a 13-year-old, I'm guessing twice. The law at that time permitted, and it continues to be the case, but the law at the time permitted a 17-year-old high school student under the same circumstances to be charged only with a 3rd-degree felony of unlawful sexual activity. So 1st degree is the worst, 2nd degree, 3rd degree would be the least serious of felonies there. With severely reduced penalties and no registration requirement. They're talking about registering as a sex offender, of course. Anyone under 14 cannot legally consent to sex. And I wanted to stress this for just a second because a lot of the headlines out there are getting this wrong. It is complicated, but this part's wrong because anyone under 14 cannot legally consent to sex. That's the way it was. That's the way it is now. That hasn't changed. So there hasn't been anything that's been done to the age limit for consent to sex. It wasn't dropped or anything. It appears there was no force or coercion used. In other words, it appears the sexual activity was voluntary. I cannot say consensual because consensual means consent, and a 14-year-old cannot consent. That's what makes it a crime. All right. SB 213, Senate bill, a 49-page bill. We're still back in 2023, okay? A 49-page bill sponsored no, this is 2024, sponsored by Republican Senate Majority Leader, whose name is Kirk Cullimore, passed into law in March 2024. So that's over a year ago. And what that did was a whole bunch of things. But the thing that's being discussed is that it changed sentence rules over sex between teenagers. Specifically, and essentially, the change in the law extended the favorable law available to 17-year-old defendants that we just talked about to 18-year-old defendants, so long as the 18-year-old defendant was still an active student in high school, and so long as the sex was voluntary. Okay? So there's a law in the book saying if you're 17, it's okay. The reason that they don't make it to 18, the law in the books, is because once you become 18, you're no longer a juvenile. Juvenile court no longer has jurisdiction over you. And what will happen is, like happened in this case with the grandchild, right? 18 was filed on as an adult. Okay. That's important to know. And of course, when you go to adult court from juvenile court, it's like double jeopardy. It gets a lot worse. The penalties and etc. This law, the law that got passed last year in March, this law was not sponsored by the Senate president, Mr. Adams, but by a senator colleague of his, Senator Kirk Cullimore, the Senate Majority Leader. The law passed with bipartisan support in 2024. The law was not retroactive. These laws seldom are. The law was, and if it is, it has to state it expressly. The law was not retroactive, so it had no direct impact on the case involving Adam's step-grandchild. So that's something that's important to understand, which is that because the case had already happened, the offending conduct had already occurred, and the charge had been filed, my gosh, you can't take the benefit of a law that gets passed after that happens, unless the law is expressly retroactive. And there are times when you're glad that that's the case, and then there's times when you're sad that that's the case, because sometimes they pass laws making things easier on a person. And actually, we're going to see that as well later on in the story, in a sense. But prosecutors acknowledged that with the law changed, although they could continue to prosecute Adams's grandchild under the former law, they have the power. It seemed fair and reasonable to allow him to take advantage of a deal that would approximate the penalties under the new law. Even though he pleads guilty to I think it was assault 2. It was they call it a class 2 felony. We use ABC here in Washington. I guess it's ABC, so it's like a B instead of a C, which is what the law allows for the 17-year-olds and now allows for 18-year-olds still in high school going forward under these circumstances. The 18-year-old was not given any additional jail time beyond the week he had already served. And that was all that one article said, and I had to go reading around to find out that there was actually a lot more to the story. Plus the 420 days on electronic home monitoring already completed, which tells me he was put on electronic home monitoring, i.e. home detention, at the time he was charged, which was over a year ago. Already completed, 4 years on probation, complete sex offender treatment, pay a fine of $1,500, and do 120 hours of community service work. He was not required to register as a sex offender. Now, the story gets a little more complicated because we're dealing with this particular attorney who's a defense attorney and apparently very famous and good at what she does. The prosecutor and defense attorney for the case, this is for the kid, the grandchild, right? Kara Tangaro said in court hearings, she's representing the grandkid. She said in court hearings that the legislation had been crucial to the improved plea deal. Well, it was. Without that law being passed, she couldn't have gotten the plea deal. telling Judge Rita Cornish at sentencing. So this is the judge. They're sentencing the kid. It's the agreed plea deal. And she's telling them that they couldn't have done it without this new law that got passed. Now, it's going to turn out she got contacted for her input on the law and actually drafted the damn thing, which is going to make things go from bad to worse, honestly. But here she is at the sentencing last year of this kid who's now got the deal, telling the judge at the sentencing, quote, "You saw the legislative change. We all agree that's not retroactive," because it's not. But the government, that's the prosecutor, did change their offer based on that. Okay. The issue is that all of this was done without anyone knowing of the relationship between Senate President Adams and the 18-year-old, or of the existence of the then ongoing criminal case. Not until Robert Gerke, reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune, discovered the connection. It turns out that although Senate President Adams knew about the case involving his grandchild, duh, of course he did. I guess there could be circumstances where he would be kept out of the loop, but he knew. The only other senator he had told was Senate Majority Leader Kirk Cullimore, Republican from Sandy, the senator who sponsored the bill. So it's Cullimore's name who's on the bill, not the name of Adams. The bill's sponsor, Cullimore, told the Tribune that Adams had requested that the charges against the relative be looked into for the legislation. Adams denied using his political power to benefit a relative. Cullimore, that's the guy who did sponsor the bill, remember? Senator Cullimore said he consulted with attorneys, including the defense attorney representing the 18-year-old high school student, who he said helped draft a change to the law that was added to a larger criminal justice bill during the 2024 legislative session. It just gets worse and worse, it seems. So this is Cullimore talking. She said, in other words, the 18-year-old's lawyer, she said the issue is that normally prosecutors in these types of cases would consider the circumstances and offer plea bargains. And she said, for whatever reason, this prosecutor is not. So the attorney, and it's Kara, I want to make sure I get the name correctly, Tangaro. Kara Tangaro is telling Senator Cullimore, that's what he's saying, that she told me that in these types of cases, prosecutors would usually consider the circumstances and offer plea bargains. In other words, something more reasonable. And she said, for whatever reason, this prosecutor is not. And I said, what would your idea be? What would your ideal be in something like this? Cullimore to the attorney. Cullimore said there was no intention that the change to the law would impact the pending case. We just thought it would be the best policy. Cullimore said that Tangaro, the attorney, drafted the language that would allow the lower level charge to be filed against 18-year-olds still in high school, and he shared it with legislative attorneys. The bill passed without much attention paid to the provision, and Governor Spencer Cox signed it into law on March 19th, 2024. The mother of the 13-year-old, neither of whom are identified, and this is not a picture of her, told the Salt Lake Tribune, "I feel like a law is the law, regardless of who you are, but that wasn't what was going on here. I feel like the 18-year-old just got special treatment, and nobody was going to say anything about it." Democratic State Senator Nate Bluen is calling on Utah Senate President J. Stewart Adams to resign after the Salt Lake Tribune first reported that Adams had initiated a change to Utah law that helped an 18-year-old relative who was charged with child rape receive a more lenient sentence. This is what he's saying. Senate President Stuart Adams must do the right thing and resign, Blauen said in a statement Friday. The rule of law should not be subject to change simply because of who you know. This is a statement from President J. Stuart Adams, and it goes on. It's rather just vociferously and somewhat repeatedly denying these allegations. And you can get a freeze frame of that or look it up on his website. And there's a picture of Senator Adams. The cheese stands alone. And now we have this clip from the local news, which I think is going to make a lot more sense now than it did at least the first time I watched it. Hopefully we filled in the holes enough that this will be a seamless story.
Okay, Alana, thank you very much. The big political story today, Utah Democrats are calling on Senate President Stuart Adams to step down. It comes after a Salt Lake Tribune report that uncovered Adams had an undisclosed personal connection to a law that was changed in 2024. Jordan Tracy's been following the story for us today. He joins us live from the state capitol. Jordan, tell us all about this. It's making waves in Utah politics right now.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. So this all stems from an article written by Robert Gerke of the Salt Lake Tribune that outlines that Senate President Stuart Adams had a personal connection with an 18-year-old who was being charged for having sex with a 13-year-old. Now, the report says that Senate President Adams only confided in Senator Kirk Cullimore about this, who ran Senate Bill 213 to change this law, and Democrats are saying it's an abuse of power.
Democratic State Senator Nate Bluen is calling for Senate President Stuart Adams to resign. Citing the report from the Salt Lake Tribune, he believes Adams used his power to get this law changed.
The law was changed based off of conversations that happened behind closed doors that we certainly weren't a party to, that we didn't have an understanding of, that we didn't know about when we were taking a vote on this issue. And so we shouldn't be changing the law in regards to specific individual cases. It should be based off of what is best for the entire state.
Since Bluen's call, Utah Democratic Party Chair Brian King has joined the call for Adams to step down. Senate Bill 213 changed the criminal code so that an 18-year-old who is actively enrolled in high school would be charged as a juvenile for having sex with a 13-year-old and face a third-degree felony. It passed with broad support, including a yay vote from Representative King. Bluen voted against it in the Senate. But Bluen says his overall issue with this situation isn't the bill on its merits. It's that Adams didn't disclose his connection to reportedly anyone other than Senator Kirk Cullimore.
I think some transparency as this was going forward would have been helpful in really counteracting what we're here talking about today. If there had been an acknowledgement in the moment that this was a personal issue for someone, I think that would have probably been a whole different conversation.
In the Tribune report, Adams says he didn't push for the law change and it did not impact the case he was connected to. He released a statement Friday saying, in part, Senator Nate Bluen's recent attacks exemplify misleading political grandstanding fueled by misinformation and deliberate distortions. He continued that contrary to fabricated and baseless claims, the law is not retroactive, does not alter the legal age of consent, and does not apply to incidents of rape, aggravated sexual assault, or offenses involving force, coercion, or threats.
Now, Brian, you can see the full statement from Senate President Adams on our website, abc4.com. We also reached out to Senator Cullimore tonight and had not gotten a response by the time of the broadcast tonight. Now, what does Senator Bluen want to see here? Well, he wants to see an investigation of an ethics complaint, possibly, or even, as he called for Senate President Adams to step down. But there was no indication tonight that any of that will be moving forward. Reporting live at the state capitol, Jordan Tracy, ABC4 News.
And there you have it. I think that's the last slide on this story. Your thoughts, Bill and Rebecca?
It's a really interesting, I've been following it. And like you said, it's complex. It's hard to know because there's a lot of really sensational headlines and then you have to dig in to find out what's really going on. But if I understand you correctly, it's kind of what I thought, that there's leniency now for an 18-year-old who's in high school, the same as there would be for a 17-year-old. And I do understand this. I was the mom of boys that were 18 very early in the senior year, right? And they were there with kids that were their peers in classes that were 16, right? And I always worried about, any kind of thing like that, would just be that age difference. And I really hammer that into them. Even when they'd go out with friends, I would say, your friends, if something happens, like if you're doing something silly, a prank, you're 18. That's going to be handled very differently if there's something, that goes wrong, the police come, I'm talking about high school stuff, but you know what I mean? The 17-year-olds get to go away. Or get away with it. An 18-year-old is an adult. So I understand that thinking. And the more I dug in, it also seemed like a lot of the legislatures were saying, this is a good law. We just don't like the way it came about, right? No transparency,
Well, yes, it
personal
passed.
connection, all of that, right? So there's got to be a way to kind of separate that. And I've been kind of looking at the chat there, and I agree. I went to a high school that was 7th grade through 12th grade. So we had seniors dating 8th graders. Of course, this was years and years ago, but I don't know. There are things that happen, then there are exceptions. It just looks bad for this senator as far as what happened, but I'm not sure that the law that was enacted is not something that could be okay, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think that that's something that is necessary to separate the two when we're discussing them.
Yes.
I mean, it can be against both, but it helps for
Yes.
clarity to talk about the law on one thing. And obviously passed on a bipartisan basis, basically saying we're going to extend it. It sounded like they're extending juvenile court jurisdiction over an 18-year-old as long as they're still in high school. And active and in these circumstances. So that's unusual, if that's correct. I don't even know if that reporting is correct. But regardless, they allow it to happen. So it did pass. But if I were counseling Senator Adams when he came to me with this plan, if I were Cullimore, I wonder what the conversation was. If I'd been Cullimore, it would have been this. Okay, so here's the thing. You've got a situation with your grandkid. I understand completely. The prosecutors are being idiots. Sometimes they're like that. But, it's easy to say that because prosecutors in situations like this, and I've represented people in exactly this situation before, have the power, even in situations like this, where there's no other criminal wrongdoing. In my case, it was something that happened years before my guy even turned 18. It was just very lately disclosed. And so he had turned 18 by the time the disclosure was there from a relative. So now he was charged in adult court where he is looking at decades in prison and having to be registered as a sex offender. In all other respects, just a stellar kid on the teams and the academics and just doing all sorts of wonderful things. And fortunately, I was dealing with the chief criminal deputy over here, and her name's Rosemary, and she has a lot of maturity and a lot of experience, which a lot of times translates into they don't have anything to prove. And the sophistication to understand, yes, this kid does not need to go to prison for 10 years and have to register as a sex offender, right? So we went through the steps to prove that he was not a predator and that he had never done this at any other time through polygraph tests. And that in conjunction with his lack of criminal history and his stellar record, we got it taken care of. Okay. Which I think is justice, because the prosecutor in that situation has the power to just throw that boy's life away for something he did when he was maybe 12, which may have been more curiosity than anything else. But that's the kind of power that these statutes can give prosecutors. And it sounds like, sorry, I'm ruminating here, but I think it's important. It sounds like that here you got this Kara, the attorney who's representing the grandkid, and the prosecutors are not being like Rosemary. They're saying, no, we're not going to give any deals. We're not going to give any deal that's going to result in anything other than apparently severe prison time and definitely having to register as a sex offender. So, and we don't even know when this kid's 18th birthday was, but it probably wasn't long after he turned 18 from 17 and would have qualified for this exception and all this stuff. But the prosecutors, they have the power. And these prosecutors were apparently flexing their muscles in that way. So it's not so easy to say to a granddad, just throw your grandkid away because the prosecutors are being assholes. And if they had a normal, experienced, competent prosecutor, then you wouldn't be in this situation. I'm sure that's not easy to say. But the fact is that you are the president of the Senate. This is your grandchild. You can't do this behind the backs of everybody. Either you tell everybody. Now, he's not going to want to tell everybody. And of course, we understand why. Because that's going to be broadcasting this scandal that's happening in his family, and his 18-year-old's name is going to be on the front pages of all the papers. So he doesn't want to tell everybody, but he has to. And if you can't tell everybody, even individually, I know it's a lot of people, and it'll get leaked, it'll get out there, obviously, but at least it's in the process of you're trying to be transparent, okay? If you can't tell everybody, then don't do anything, okay? Don't do anything. Now, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say what could make this really bad. What would make this really, really bad is if it turned out, and I'm not saying this is true, if it turned out that Kara, the attorney representing the grandchild, knows that the law won't be retroactive, but obviously knows who her client's grandfather is. And they had a meeting in which they talked about adding this on for the specific purpose of passing it so it could be used, hopefully, in plea negotiations with the kid. And then everything happened from there, okay? Then there's a lot of people who are going to be in trouble for that. Once again, I'm not saying that happened, but right now, I would have advised Mr. Adams, if you can't tell people why it is you're doing this, and I understand why you can't, then don't do it.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I'm just saying but that takes me back into the loop, right? But if
Yep.
it's his grandkid who's hanging out and is going to be thrown away by these prosecutors, and he has an idea that this will help his grandkid, it's not retroactive, but if he has an idea that it would help his grandkid, what grandfather's not going to do that? I don't know.
Well, and sometimes you're not aware of something until it happens in your family.
Yeah. I
You-
mean, this has so many moving parts. It's like
It
the
does.
perfect storm, I think.
It is.
The first off, my birthday is September 14th. What that meant was that I started kindergarten as a 4-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I started my senior year as a 16-year-old, which meant I was 15, 14, 13 when I started my freshman year. So I get the age difference. I understand how that happens. We separate schools by ages to begin with, generally, right? We have an elementary school and a middle school and all that kind of stuff. Intermediary kind of between. Sometimes I had a intermediary school between my elementary and my middle school, and then I had a junior high and then high school. And we do that for a reason, because ages, you shouldn't have 18-year-olds with 9-year-olds and 7-year-olds. The system is set up that in most places, some places it's 10th, 11th, 12th, but most places high school is 9th through 12th grade. You are putting 13-year-olds next to 18 or 19-year-olds. It doesn't take much to be a 19-year-old in your senior year. You fall back 1 year or so. Maybe we need to consider the fact that if you're going to put teenage kids in a school together, seniors are going to date freshmen. That's going to happen. Maybe the system itself has to change, because I don't think on its surface, this 18-year-old kid, let's just assume the best in him. He's dating a girl in his school. He's not inside his head thinking all these things. Again, giving the benefit of the doubt, he's just dating a girl in the school. She's a freshman. He's a senior. That happened in my school. No one thought twice of that. No one was having this kind of conversation. So maybe we're to a point where we're mature enough as a society to recognize that 13-year-olds shouldn't be in the same school building day in and day out with 18 and 19-year-old kids, because that's what's going to happen. And maybe the system now needs to split it up so that it is 2 or 3 years of schooling at the end, and maybe 3 years at a time before that. Otherwise, you're going to run into this again and
you know
again.
what, the eyes, right?
Yeah. I understand. But you're going to have 19 and 18-year-old kids dating 13 and 14-year-old kids because they're all in the same school. It just would, the problem is created by the system. It's not an 18-year-old kid's.
You know, I got to say, I went to a school that was 10th, 11th, 12th was high school. 7th, 8th, 9th was junior high, right? I mean, 13 is squarely in, that's 7th grade.
That
This
can
isn't a
be 8th
freshman.
and 9th. It can be. It can be. And a lot of, like my school was 7th grade through 12th, all together in the same halls. 9th through 12th is your common, not in Washington State. I know what you're talking about, RFM,
Okay.
but you know, and then you add, I think, I don't know. And like you said, giving this boy the benefit of the doubt that it was a dating situation. He doesn't know anything about consent. Neither does the younger person know anything. They don't understand that she can't give consent. I tried to hammer this into my kids because, like I said, they were older. They were 18, and I was so concerned because one of them was dating someone who was a junior, but a young junior who was 15. I'm like, that is too, you know, it all comes down to the gap in the ages, you know, and I see people in the comments saying that back and forth. In one of the news stories I read, there was an example of Utah of a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old who had been together. They were both charged with child abuse. I mean, they're just, you know, there has to be a way to make it to make it work out for the best for everybody and also deter anything really negative from happening. I don't know. It's a very complex issue.
I was a 13-year-old freshman, RFM. You said 13 is 8th grade. No, 13 for me was 9th grade.
Right.
Well, for how many?
3 weeks, whatever
3
it was, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't long.
No, I
But
have a son like that too. 13 in 9th grade. Yeah.
Freshmen are going to date seniors.
Okay. My conclusion on this is I'm completely in favor of the law. I think that, you know, the funny thing that happened, I'll just tell you, because I was talking with Rebecca about this whole story an hour before the show. And I had one opinion, and I was going through the same facts again for like the 5th time through these slides. And I had arranged them in such a way as to try and make them make sense, be in chronological order, and go from one subject nicely into the next. And as I was doing it, this just started looking shadier and shadier to me.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine, again, at some level, this has to be something, the system has to do something different to prevent it. Somebody suggested better education towards these kinds of things. When I was in school, this wasn't even talked about. Seniors were looking to date freshmen, and freshmen were looking to date seniors, and no one was having this conversation. Of course, I'm 46 years old, and so we're 25 years ago. But nobody was having this kind of conversation. Again, should an 18-year-old who's give him the benefit of the doubt, make it a female. It's an 18-year-old female senior dating a 14-year-old freshman girl or boy. They have a romantic relationship. They have sex. Should that 18-year-old senior in high school get the book thrown at them and end up having whatever years and years of that? That doesn't make sense to me on just a reasonable level.
Well, the problem lies, as it usually does, in the legislature's overzealousness. That when they are faced with a really bad situation, whether it's a DUI or, you know, child sex abuse and child rape, for crying out loud, that they go to work with hammer and tong and draft laws that are way too broad, that are so broad that it will take into account any kind of violation of this, without apparently ever thinking once that there are instances like the ones we're talking about where maybe we don't want to treat people who have sex in high school, the same as a child molester. That's really, I think, what we're talking about.
Yeah, big difference.
I would also advise the Senate President Adams that his response was really, really ill-conceived. It's very inflammatory. It's very burn the house down and I'm innocent and you guys are all liars. I think that a note of contrition might have been more helpful than all of his fiery words.
And I'll agree with you too, by the way. The gist of the story is that this guy should have recused himself. He should have stepped. The moment that happened, he no longer gets to be the guy who suggests it, wants it in, works behind the scenes to make it happen.
Yes.
He should have just completely stepped away from the side and hoped someday someone would put a law like that into effect.
And if I felt like this was really going to happen, I'm trying to put myself in Adam's shoes now, and this is really needed, although that's corrupt, I would at least go to my counterpoint, the Democrat majority leader. If for a private conversation, look, I'm gonna ask you to keep this confidential. I'm gonna lay all my cards out and I'll do what you tell me to do. But here's the situation. It's my grandkid. It's not retroactive, blah, blah, blah. And what do you think I should do? And take some advice.
And the fact that the politicians, except for one, not knowing the background, voted for it, at least on some level. Again, politicians vote for bad laws all the time, but at least on some level, they all agreed that that was a good progressive move to make, or at least that it was part of a bunch of other laws and it didn't stick out as being so negative as to turn it all down, right? The bill included lots of things. So the law itself, the change itself may not be bad. It's not that this guy created a bad law to protect his family, but he still had interests that were undisclosed that interfere with the transparency and honesty of the system.
Very good. All right. So who's got the next story? And what is the next story? I think it has something to do with where's Aaron Sherinian?
Ooh, then it must be my story because as we know, I've been following this since January 2 years ago, right? A year and a half ago. I'm calling this the wiggly words of Aaron Sherinian. Let me see if I can move my slides here. Yeah. So let's see. I think we went. Yeah, there we go. On Mormonish, I was just so curious about the whole scenario that we'll kind of go into, touch on that. I even did, I think, 2 different episodes. Where's the new LDS Church spokesman, Aaron Sherinian? Because I'm sure a lot of you are aware he was, hired and then disappeared. So basically what happened in a nutshell very quickly is that in January of 2024, or was it 2023? Now I can't remember. It's been 18 months. Anyway, Aaron Sherinian, this new person, is the church spokesman. Instantly, people started looking at his social media, and he had a lot of posts that indicated that he was an ally. He was at a pride parade. He had some other kinds of statements. This, of course, sort of became a flashpoint in, all of Mormondom, where a lot of us were like, oh my gosh, does this signify a change in the church? They've hired an ally to be a spokesman. They must have known, right, that he was an ally in order to, make him the spokesperson. And it means
Rebecca?
there's a change. Yes.
I'm just noticing he's wearing a purple tie.
Yeah, I'm saying there's a lot of signals here. I'm still reading a lot into this. So you're absolutely right. And I know you guys covered this very well on the Mormonism After Dark. So we're just
But we wanted you there. You couldn't be there. We actually asked if you would come on and you were otherwise occupado.
Friday night, occupado.
I would like to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. And so on the other side of the coin, a lot of more faithful LDS were like, there's no way the church would hire this guy who's an ally. We refuse to accept that this is the direction the church is going. So a lot of us were like, well, then this is sort of a flashpoint. When Aaron starts speaking for the church, making statements like his predecessor did, Eric Hawkins, we'll know that the church is going this direction of, more inclusive, more accepting of LGBTQ. If he doesn't make any statements, we'll know, oh dear, they kind of made a mistake or they didn't know that this would, be out in the open. So we were very curious to watch what would happen. Basically, what happened is Aaron Sherinian disappeared. I even started a little ticker. Do you remember that? It's been 327 days since we've heard from Aaron Sherinian. He literally fell off the face of the earth, and we'll play a clip in a second to kind of his point of view. I did do some things behind the scenes to kind of determine if he was still working for the church. Things on his LinkedIn didn't change. He was still listed as his former company. It was really strange. He put out a statement that said, "I'm so excited to work for the church." Everything exploded on social media, and then nothing. And he didn't change some of his, things that you would change if you were a global director of communications for a global faith.
He was being very still.
And this is what we're going to see in the clip. But so I had my co-host Landon call the church office building and ask for Aaron Sherinian. And he kind of went through a phone tree, and we were able to learn that he did have an office there. He had an admin. We were able to leave a message. So we're like, okay, so he is there, and he has a presence, and he has an office, kind of putting it down in our little detective notebook. I had another experience where I ran into someone. I'll be very vague about this. This would only happen to me, who was very close to the situation and was able to tell me that Aaron Sherinian was directing things as far as statements and the way things were handled from, say, Doug Anderson, right? So he had his fingers in the pie.
Was this at an Applebee's restaurant?
I'm not saying another word, and you know why. Does this to me on the air. Anyway, what I'm saying is that he was there. He was in the background, but he was never making a front-facing statement, because all of us were watching like sharks, right? As soon as he said something speaking for the church, we're all like, look, an ally is speaking for the church, right? So he laid low forever. There was a little article where he kind of showed up at a meeting, maybe like a year later nothing. But suddenly we understand that he's going to speak at Fair. And suddenly in the middle of the night, was it Thursday night or Friday night? Whatever it was, last week,
Wednesday night,
I come across the video of him speaking. They've posted it. Of course, they took it down right after that, but I was
why do
able
you think
to.
they took it down?
Probably because I recorded it and started putting stills out. I don't know.
Right, because they realized the import of what Aaron Sherinian said.
Yeah, I don't think I have that much power, but yeah, definitely.
I did not everywhere.
Exactly. I did not put the clips out. I'm always nervous about stuff like that, but you guys showed them, which was great. So maybe before we go to, I'm just going to touch on a few little things. Maybe now's a good time to play the clip where, in being asked a couple questions, he gave a speech and then he answered questions. He explained why he was just quiet for like over 18 months, why he wasn't there anymore.
Very skilled and very knowledgeable at what they do, in addition to being spiritual and spiritually minded. So that brings up our next question. This is a much more difficult question. So when you first came on board the church, there was a lot of online flack, should we say, and people I've gotten a few questions here asking directly whether or not you support the family proclamation, and how was that for you when you first came on board? Has it improved? And how do you deal with that?
I've learned a number of things, and I've taken counsel from some people that I admire and love and that I sustain. And one of the things that I've learned is to study carefully something that doesn't come natural to me, and that's in Doctrine and Covenants 101, I believe, the idea about being still. And sometimes I thought that being still meant doing nothing. But being still is active. And it means allowing for some things to happen so that some better things can take place. So you use the term flack. I'll call it dialogue. I'll call it some critique. I'll call it whatever you want to call it. One of the things that I've learned is that when there's, in the internet age and in our current reality, we want to react immediately. That's a tactic in certain parts of communication. But when it comes to you, sometimes the best thing to do is to be still. There's real value in giving a moment for you to reflect and to let the other people that are talking with or maybe at you some time. The other thing that I've learned is that I got some quick advice when there were things coming at me. And I'm talking to a room of people who know what it's like to put yourself out there. So you receive you have the same sort of reality perhaps in your own life. Someone said to me in a well-meaning way, well, don't take it personally. There was nothing more personal. I take it personally because I think the person who's taking issue with me or who's criticizing me or who has something to serve me, they're probably taking it very personally. And that's rough. But if I really want to be a peacemaker, if I really want to follow his counsel, I probably have to take it personally. Not to react or be rude, not to be reactionary or ruthless, but to be real and to say to myself, that person on the other end of the line, if you will, the proverbial line, is expressing something very personal. And what is it they're trying to say? They love the Lord, and they're expressing something that they're working through. So maybe one of the best things that I can do is not to be weak, not to let things that are untrue go unresolved or unacknowledged. But if I'm going to be a peacemaker, I have to see that it's personal for them. And there's something driving a question. I hope that answers the question.
I think we can
And of
stop it
course,
there.
I've been
then
very
we'll
clear.
part of it. So, but again, I bring up he is a global
Rebecca?
communications director. Yes.
Just so that you know, that is right at the point. He's nowhere near done talking.
Oh no,
So
I
he
know.
hasn't answered the
He
question.
says the same thing.
Well, this is
kind
the
of
point at
over and
which
over.
he addresses the issue about whether he supports the
Yeah, and
family
I'm going to go into
proclamation.
that. I have a slide on that. That's why I cut it there. So I just wanted to say one more time about stillness. When you're the global communications director for a global faith, it's not the time to be still, right? You need to make statements. You need to come out and say things. Your predecessor, Eric Hawkins, did that. He made statements all the time. Doug Anderson, sort of a second in command, he's the one that started making all the statements in the last 18 months. And I do know behind the scenes that Aaron Sherinian was guiding and crafting those statements. So he just didn't do anything forward facing, which I thought was very interesting. So you're right, RFM, a series of questions that were like really hard hitting right at him. I'm really surprised that he let himself get in this situation because again, the whole issue is, are you an ally? Are you going to, demonstrate your allyship as you work for the church? So exactly what you said, he was asked at FAIR directly, do you support the family proclamation, right? The proclamation to the world. And after he went, on and on about being still and all of that, in answer to that direct question, he said, I've been very clear. My role, my job, it's to support the leaders of the church and to be a servant of the Lord. So I don't know. What do you think about that answer?
My job is to support the family proclamation. Of course I support it.
Yeah, but not really. Here's the thing. People who are on the faithful side are criticizing him for not coming out and saying he supports it. Those of us more on the other side are saying, are you trying to send us a message? You didn't say that you supported it. You said it's your job. Wink, wink. Maybe that's a way that you say, I have to sort of, allude to the fact that I support it because it is my job and it's my role. So he really said nothing to satisfy either side, left everybody kind of wondering. So.
If you mind if I jump in here for just a second?
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you, but thought about that.
So you said, how did he get himself into this? First off, if it's the people that he sustained who told him to be still, he's unable to not get out of being still until the people who he sustained have told him he can start doing something other than be still. In other words, this isn't just a coincidence. This is the moment that LDS leadership chose to unveil Aaron Sherinian, number one. Number two, he said, it's my job. We all could say that. Like I could say, it's my job to put content out every week that helps people wake up from the messiness of Mormonism, but it actually is my job. When he says that, there are members of the church who, in response to questions like this, say, it's my job to sustain the brethren. And we know what that means.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they're paid to do it. As RFM's laughing about, Sherinian is telling you, it's my job. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. I get insurance. I get a bonus at the end of the year for Christmas. I get all the fun things. I get 2 weeks vacation. It's my job to sustain the family proclamation. He doesn't answer the question. He skirts around it. But what he says is, I will do whatever my employer tells me to do in these kinds of situations within reason. And I get paid to sustain the family proclamation. So I do.
Yeah, and for the last year and a half, I have visions of George Costanza going into that office with that one file every day. That's what he's been doing.
Penske file.
The
He has
Pinsky
been
file.
doing the
Thank you.
Penske file. I know.
Thank you. And his problem was saying my role, my job is to support the leaders of the church, is that it can be sending a message of, oh, I'm on your side, but it's
Yes.
also the message of acquizzling.
Yes.
He's signaling he is acquizzling.
Yep. No, and that's the problem that I especially watched Greg Mattson of Quick Media, and he's like, really? Our church spokesman cannot say, I support the proclamation. You know, he seemed pretty incensed about that, you know, that
I
he
would
could not
think.
come out and say those words.
This has been blowing up for a few days now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how is it that the director of communications can't get the word out if he's been misunderstood,
I don't
or
know.
if he misspoke and would like to clarify the record?
Exactly. And it seems to get worse. And I know you guys showed the videos, but to me, I like to kind of read what he says. That kind of hits home. So another thing that he's asked, a very direct question, and these are questions from the audience. The moderator was reading them. So here's a question from the audience to Aaron. How do I try to support my LGBTQ brothers and sisters while standing for the family proclamation to the world? I find it hard to balance that line. There's a reason they're asking Aaron this, because they saw the social media. He seemed to be an ally. He seemed to be doing that initially before he became still for all that time. So Aaron says, I think the answer is love. I think that's what I've learned from this room. I think the answer is love. It's obedience to what is truth. It's following our prophet. It's loving people in our lives, which is just like stringing some random things together. It's love, but you have to take a hard line like the church. It's love, but you have to take a hard line like the prophet. What did you guys think of that answer?
It's balderdash. He's a hack.
He's not actually giving you anything useful.
Exactly.
He's not actually telling you any steps you could take. He wants to tell you, I sustain the brethren, but I don't support the family proclamation. That's what he's saying. And in this instance, he's saying, I want to be a temple recommend holding, job holding Mormon in this entity's organization. And I want to be able to sustain LGBT people and acknowledge that they don't have it fair. And this is the best I can do.
Yep. No, I've been looking for him, stalking him for all this time.
Yes, you have. You've been a fan from the very beginning. You thought this was going to be super Aaron.
Exactly. And now to hear him actually come out and speak, I was kind of like, wah, 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 wah. I almost would have more respect if he really would just say, I believe in the proclamation. But he's not even doing that. It's very, like I called this segment, the wiggly words. So here's another wiggly thing that he talked about. He was asked directly about the recent talk online that the church pays influencers. Of course, we've covered that several times. It's a big deal. Does the church pay influencers to, put out content that they can use for missionary tools and to promote the church?
Did he say yes or no, Rebecca?
Well, it's going to take 2 paragraphs for me to let you know what he said, and you still won't know at the end. He said, I'll elaborate on it, but I will also say that in an attempt to be as frank and as transparent as possible, the church, through spokespeople, some of who are here, has made it clear, there are so many commas in this, that the church does not pay for or enter into brand partnerships. Now that's wiggly, because we're not talking about a brand partnership. We're talking about paying somebody to create content that the church uses on their own site.
He's such a bad liar, isn't he?
Yeah, as was reported by some online, right? And I agree, we may have used that term brand partnership just because we didn't understand, but a brand partnership is where you pay somebody to put out their own content and look like they're naturally speaking about a product. I use this every day. I wish somebody would give me a brand deal. Send me any of your products, everybody. Anyway, but to pay an influencer, that person creates a video, the church puts it out. So
he's looking for one small aspect of this that the church is not doing, so he can deny it and try and get rubes to think he's denied the whole thing.
No, that's it. And then he goes on, he says, I'm not picking a fight with those people. I'm not trying to disagree with them publicly. And I guess we are those people.
I'm just trying to lie my ass off and hope I get away with it.
What the church does do, of course, he's going to tell us what the church does, is engage with people who are the very best at what they do. So we, the church can transparently use that content or use some of those ideas as we express with other people. So, Bill,
And
do
they
they
pay them
pay
for it.
influencers or
And
not?
they pay them for it. That's what he didn't say.
That's the part he didn't say. That's what I was trying to ask Bill. There's no yes or no answer. That's exactly it. And so I, of course, and we've talked about all of this before, but not only do we have multiple LDS faithful influencers who say, yes, we are paid. We don't have a brand deal, but we are paid for our content as we should be. If you're going to, put together something for the church that they use, you should be paid. And that's a fact. So I don't know why he just couldn't say that. He hung his hat on that brand deal. It's not a brand deal. They're not deceiving people by saying, hey, it's me, David Snell. Here's my own channel and I this and that. No, he's creating something and it's put on the church's channel. Even the church's own, and I can't believe there's actually a job called this, Director of Reputation Management. Okay. This guy, Derek Westra.
It's right down the hall from Director of Reputation Repair.
Which is a much bigger office. That's right, because the management doesn't do their job. But I won't read through all of this, but this was in the Tribune, and they clearly explain they do hire people to create content that the church puts out on its own channel, and there is nothing wrong with that. One thing I think is very funny is when David Snell said, they pay us for our work, not our testimonies. Well, when you're a promoter of the church, your work is your testimony in faith. So again, a little bit of splitting hairs, a little bit of wiggle room. But for Aaron to just flat out say, we don't pay people, that's not true. There are whole departments. We've talked to people that work in their media relations where they pay usually through a middle company, a media company, they pay them. So I don't know why he's so hell-bent on having us not know that. And I will say there's nothing wrong with it. Do you know that the Pope just a few weeks ago had a huge Jubilee for digital missionaries and Catholic influencers? They invited all the influencers to come in and said, take pictures, post this. We need to get everybody excited about Catholicism again. And it's working. So this is just what people are doing. I don't know why Aaron can't say it. So there was one more thing that I thought was really interesting that he said. And the question was, there are people still questioning the validity of the Tim Ballard statement. Now, if you guys remember this, a statement came out in Vice magazine where the church denounced Tim Ballard, and then he was excommunicated soon after. Aaron says, this is a question, is that a real statement? Now, in Aaron's defense, he was hired 3.5 months after that statement came out. Okay, statement came out in September. He was hired in January. He says, I hope so I'm not going to address that specific issue because I'm not sure what specifically it's referring to.
Bullshit. He's the worst liar I've ever seen. And I've represented some.
I just need to ask you, do you think and this was big, people questioned whether this was from the church. They leaked it into this. People still question it. Do you think someone that was hired a few months after this statement, this extremely controversial statement was made, do you think that person would be aware of what had happened in the last couple months in the
he hasn't been doing anything else for a year and a half, and he's not aware of what happened 3.5 months before he signed up. He was existing in the vacuum somewhere.
Well, he was in his office with his admin. Landon found out. So, but again, here it is, September. Mormon Church denounces Tim Ballard morally unacceptable activities. Here's the statement if you guys haven't read it for a while. But I just feel like that was a strange answer because I think he should have said maybe I wasn't really involved in that, but he said, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
What
the
Tim
whole
Ballard
point, by the way, Rebecca, my opinion is the whole point was to avoid the issue because it leads back to Elder Ballard and the church.
Exactly.
His goal is to not even open the door, take the first step down the path that leads to a place he doesn't want to go. And the same with the other thing where he was talking, or not talking rather, about his support of the family proclamation, because he doesn't want to start talking about that because it leads right to the part of the family proclamation that deals with what he may have used to have been an ally for.
Yeah, no, and I think we saw that in every single answer. But to me, the worst one is Tim Ballard. Who's that? I just don't believe that somebody that is called as the global communications leader would not be aware of what had happened a few months prior. Here it is. He was hired in January. That statement came out in September. Now, after he made that very short statement I just read, I don't know what that is. He says, however, you can find anything on the church website. And he went on for about 5 minutes about how incredible the church website is. You can look up any information. The answers are there if you search for them. They do a great job of being really transparent, putting everything out there. So I
It's the
just
same
typed
old
in,
line about the church isn't hiding anything. It's all
yeah,
there, buried 3 clicks deep on the website.
exactly. So I typed in Tim Ballard vice statement, nothing there. Nothing came up whatsoever. I typed in some different versions of that. So anyway, it was just very interesting to have him suddenly pop up. Here he is, performing his duties as he should, very forward facing. But the words that were coming out of his mouth were just, I think, left a lot of us confused. And believe it or not, kind of upset people on either side of the spectrum. The faithful saying, why can't you be more direct, and say, yes, I believe in the proclamation. And everyone else saying, if you're trying to tell us something in a kind of a subtle way, I don't know. It's very interesting. And that's my final thing. Who me? Wiggly words. So, and you guys covered it very well on Mormonism After Dark. Everybody should go over there and pick that one up if you haven't seen it. But just, I don't want to say disappointing, but just not what I thought it would be when we finally heard from Aaron.
I'll say disappointing then. What do you think, Bill?
If I can go back a slide here. The thing that, and again, I'm still not 100% clear on this, but my understanding was, and if it's true, this answer doesn't fit. And I said this on Mormonism After Dark, which is if the influencer, part of what that influencer understands the assignment as in order to get paid is that they post this video on their own branded channels.
That's a brand deal. Yeah, they're saying the church does not do that. They don't do it.
No, I think you're misunderstanding me. So if the church reached out to these guys and said, make us a video, don't post it anywhere, just send it to us, and we're going to use it in the next I'm a Mormon campaign, for instance. I actually don't think I have a real big problem with that.
I don't either. That's what I said. I do not have a problem, but you still are paid. So you're paid. It's okay to say, yes, we pay people. Yeah.
What I understand happens, though, is that these influencers, at least their understanding and the way it worked for them, was they created a video for their branded content and sent it on to the church and got paid. In other words, if I went on to TikTok for these creators, I would find these videos that they got paid for.
They're saying no.
They're saying it did not happen.
They're saying no. That's what the church is saying, and that's what the faithful influencers are saying. They're saying when they're asked to create something, they create it and they give it to the church. To do it otherwise, it would be more of a brand deal where you, on your own channel, your own platform, kind of fit into your daily life. You're brushing your teeth. You know what I really love? The Lord, right? And people are way more susceptible to that because it looks so natural. Although, as we saw from the one gal, seems to be more scripted. They're literally telling you word for word what to say. So yeah, it's a fine line, but there is payment.
I'm well aware that the church owned the content, that they were able to do whatever they wanted with it. If the only place I can find these videos of these influencers across the entire internet is on a production by the church solely for the church, I don't know that I have a problem with it. Now, Sherinian's still sidestepping the issue. Yeah. He's still talking around it.
Yeah.
But again, I would have to see that. I would have to see or not, sort of understand how these influencers understood the assignment and where that video first showed up.
Yep, I agree.
Anyway.
Yep. No, that's a very good point. And it's a distinction, although maybe not such a big distinction. But yeah, if anyone knows, if anyone has experience with this, let us know, because wiggle words.
I don't see any problem with it either, but you know something? The church is so tight when it comes to money. They got more of it than God, but they are so tight with it that, they come up with all these crazy things that I don't think there are any members. There must be some somewhere. I don't think there are a lot of members who would bat their eyelids twice if they find out the church pays people to do promotional videos for them who are already popular, I mean, that we had a whole string of commercials. I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say some of the people that they're offering these to are people that are not super well known. And so I think the idea is that you would come across this and think it was just a genuine person brushing their teeth and saying, I love the Lord, right? That it is a little scripted and it looks too natural. So somebody might be pulled in. But I mean, this is just how everybody's doing it. They're saying this is why religion is on the rise, just because of the social media influence. People are attracted.
So caveat emptor,
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to believe everything? For crying out loud. Anyway, I'm a lot more, I think, laissez-faire on this.
Yeah.
If I'm using that French expression correctly, the one I learned in 9th grade. Anyway, so where are we right now? We're here. About this is FAIR. FAIR had their own conference. Sunstone had their conference a week ago. FAIR had their conference still last week, but it's like a week later. Okay. So they were doing this last Wednesday, like you said, Rebecca, when Aaron Sherinian was giving his speech and doing his wonderful bang-up job at Q&A. And then they had talks over the next 2 days. One thing I noticed when I looked through the talks that were available, we're only going to talk about 3 of them. There was quite a paucity of presentations at FAIR compared to Sunstone. I mean, what I saw was about 8 people. I'm not sure, but they have one after another. They don't have like different breakout rooms. Sunstone had what, 5, 6 different rooms going at the same time all day long.
Yeah.
So there were like 5 to 6 times more speakers presenting on 5 to 6 times more subjects, but they somehow managed to get in Brad Whitbeck, who, according to the abstract, is a comedian, which was a surprise to me, I must say. It says, for decades, we've been taught to avoid talking about religion or politics. And it seems to have made only made things worse. I'll be drawing for my skills as a comedian. Did you know that Brad Whitbeck was a comedian, Bill?
I knew he was a comedian.
Have you ever laughed at anything he said? Because I don't find it funny.
I've laughed at him and them. I haven't laughed with them.
Yeah, this was back before the light went out of his eyes. This picture was taken, I think. Rebecca, do you find him funny?
Well, he's also an actor. He was in that movie, Get the Missionaries Out of Germany, that very sensationalized movie. Yeah, he popped up there as one of the missionaries going around trying to rescue the other missionaries and get them out of Germany right before World War II on the very last train that goes out,
Strangely, Brad Whitbeck, Carden Ellis, and Kwaku El, all 3 were actors before Midnight Mormons. That's a strange.
And all 3 call themselves comedians, and I've never heard any of them say something funny.
So there's that.
Okay, but anyway, he gave a talk about the path of the peacemaker and how it is he's going to say, I don't know. Well, they got to fill it with somebody. Okay, now this is a really good one. Michael R. Ash. I saw this one and I thought, Michael, you are my hero. A Mesoamerican Urim and Thummim. Okay, he's breaking the creativity meter on this one. Abstract. Michael argues the interpreters were likely, note the word, likely modeled after the divining stones used by Mesoamerican shamans. I'm surprised nobody saw this before. Aren't you, Bill?
Yeah.
Early Latter-day Saints called them spectacles, a term reflecting their form, 2 stones linked together, which also echoes the Mesoamerican concept of duality, which has absolutely nothing to do with the point, but we're going to throw it in there because it makes it sound like it's stronger. Like sacred divining stones, they were symbolically bundled, which means something other than what the spectacles of Joseph Smith were described as being bundled in Moroni's stone box until Joseph unsealed them through a translation. So bundled and unsealed are both in quotation marks, which means he's going to give some kind of radical, crazy ass interpretation of those to make them fit somehow. I know how the game is played. I used to be one of those guys, those apologists. But I think that Michael Ash may have changed the entire field of Mormon apologetics with this discovery. What do you think, Rebecca?
Yeah, I did not follow all the things at FAIR. There was the one about child protection that I was watching, but
that's the next one.
Oh, good. Yeah, I feel like they can just say, they can just say whatever they want. And the audience probably went, right? So I'm sure we'll see this introduced and trickling out into the mainstream. I'm sure we'll have faithful relatives that say back to us, oh, no, that was the bundle of the Urim and Thummim. Yeah, it's going to be the new word, bundle, I think.
Yes, very good.
I'm sure Michael laid out maybe 5 or 6 solid examples of Mesoamerican people in the past using duality stones tied together, right? I'm sure there's some of this out there. There's got to be precedent for this. I'm sure. I just did a Google search and I couldn't find anything, but I'm sure he had examples.
Well, maybe once they get around to releasing his presentation at FAIR, then we'll know about this. But by George, I think he's got it. I'm just glad Michael didn't make an ash of himself. That's terrible. But the presentation at FAIR that's really getting all the publicity has to do with, thank you, Scab, J76. With this presentation, it was given in the morning at 10:45. Who cares? But it's by Randy Austin and Carrie Nielsen. Randy Austin is a lawyer for Curtin McConkie. He's been there for a long time. Apparently, my understanding is he actually helped design and implement the helpline, which has been so helpful to the LDS Church, if not to the victims of abuse. It's also been pretty helpful to a lot of the perpetrators. So here's the abstract on that. Child abuse is a complex societal issue that impacts a large percentage of children worldwide. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is committed to helping in the fight against this evil scourge. The church's local leaders, assisted by the abuse helpline, play an important role in preventing abuse and helping individuals and families when abuse occurs. Okay, it was okay up to that sentence. That sentence is starting to go off the cliff, like Thelma and Louise, and now it's going to head straight down for the bottom. The church's abuse helpline and the clergy penitent privilege are effective tools in the church's mission to make children safer.
How is that, RFM?
I think that lie is too nice a word for that. The church's abuse helpline and the clergy penitent privilege are effective tools in the church's mission to make children safer. All I will say is, I want this Austin character to tell that to the two victims in the Bisbee, Arizona case, one of whom would not have continued to be abused by her father, and one who never would have been abused by her father if the helpline had told the bishop to report it to the police. That's what I want this Austin guy to do.
If he was asked to explain how the church's abuse helpline and clergy penitent privilege are effective tools to make children safer, I'm trying to figure out what he would say, and I can't come up with it.
What he says is that, look, here's the thing. Take the hotline out of it, okay? The helpline is an absolute joke, all right? But if you just talk about the priest penitent privilege, it's a highly complex and very contentious issue. There are voices on both sides. I mean, there's the First Amendment in the first place to take into account, right? So pretty much all this discussion is kind of academic at this point. But there are arguments on both sides. And of course, he's going to take the side that favors the Mormon Church, which is that if you have a privilege on anything a guy says to his bishop, then he's more likely to confess his sin to the bishop than if there is no such privilege. And only if he confesses his sin to the bishop and the bishop knows about it, does the bishop have the opportunity of encouraging him to report himself to the police. None of which would happen if there were no priest penitent privilege. Okay, so that's his argument, but that is an argument, but he's saying it like it's God's law. And that's going to lead into Jasmine Rappley running it, picking it up like a stick and running with it in a video that she made, which we're going to show, which has gotten a whole lot of attention because she's just parroting what he says as if it's true. Now, if you're discussing the issue in a less impartial way, in a more impartial way, then you might note on the other side of this particular issue that Miranda versus Arizona, or Arizona v. Miranda, whatever it was, that went up to the Supreme Court, I think it was like back in 1966, it's almost 60 years ago, which mandated, this will actually have to do with what we're talking about, which mandated that before police could conduct a custodial interrogation of a suspect, they had to advise him of his Miranda rights, i.e. the right to an attorney, okay? And one of the main rationales behind that was because the idea that there were people in organized crime the more sophisticated criminals, right? They knew they had the right to an attorney, but it's these dummies out there who are unsophisticated criminals. They don't know. So they have the right to be told. They have the right to know, just like those, the Gotti types. So that was one of the bases for it. Now, everybody who says something incriminating that said in custody and that said during interrogation by police, okay? Everybody who says something like that, it's going to get suppressed unless there are Miranda warnings given at the outset. All right. The fact that everybody, before they give an incriminating statement while they're in custody, subject to interrogation, before anybody gives an incriminating statement, they're going to have to be read their Miranda rights. So they're going to know they have the right to an attorney and they have the right to remain silent. Are we clear so far? All I'm saying is that it is remarkable how many dodos will still waive their Miranda rights after being advised of them and go ahead and blab to the cops. I can't tell you the number of times I've had clients come back through my door that I've represented before and seen that they talked to the cops, and I upbraided them strongly and said, you never talk to the cops. I don't care if you're Hitler. I don't care if you're the Pope. You never talk to the cops because anything you say will be misquoted and then used against you. It is a no-win scenario. The only way you win is by not playing. You don't say anything. All right? So then they go out and do something else dumb, and I get the reports, and I'm reading through them, and I go, they wouldn't talk to the cops again. And I would have them come in, and I would excoriate them again. I said, how many times do I have to tell you not to talk to the cops? Okay, so all I'm saying is that the argument that he's making is that people will be more likely to talk to the bishop if they know that it is privileged. Okay. And there are still lots of other criminals out there who will go ahead and blab to the cops, even though what they're saying is privileged, and they have to actually actively waive the privilege in order to do so. So he's not given the whole story.
Sorry, can I just say that the idea talking to the bishop somehow ends up in a victim being helped? The steps for that to happen are very nebulous. One of my favorite words. I mean, in a lot of cases, the perpetrator feels really relieved if the bishop doesn't push, go to law enforcement. He's like, oh, whew, okay, I can stop now. Sometimes there is no help for the victim. The steps are not clearly outlined. Just because the person comes in and talks to the bishop and feels better, as we saw in Arizona, does not mean at all that for almost a decade, right, the abuse can continue. So that
there's no helpline for victims.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So, so this is what Jasmine Rapoli did. I think she might have gotten a bit ahead of this one, although I'm sure she was thrilled to find out that actually all the things that the church is doing that makes it look like they're hurting victims and they're helping predators, it's really reversed because of what this lawyer who represents the church said at the FAIR conference.
It'd be interesting to get other lawyers' opinions or other people's opinions outside the faith and see if everyone agrees. Seems like this would be a very isolated opinion.
Yeah. So there's Randy Austin, and talks about his relationship to Curtin McConkie. He serves as lead outside controversy and crisis counsel for the church, for the Mormon church. So that's what he does. He's a fixer, and he runs around and tries to fix these things before they go into the courtroom. That's how I interpret that. And I think that's correct. Okay, so here's what Jasmine Rapoli did on her channel in response. She actually cannot understand because it does seem the opposite of the way things would be. And she says that a number of times in astonishment.
All right, sorry about that. I had to switch.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's not a click. You gotta. Thank you.
Yep.
This is going to sound crazy, but when bishops are not required to report SA, more victims actually get help. It sounds backwards. You would think that more mandatory reporting laws would lead to more SA being reported. But what actually happens is that in states where clergy are mandated reporters, the system actually gets overwhelmed with false reports. Studies show that the total number of reported cases does often go up. However, fewer legitimate SA cases get through and the real victims get harder to find. Turns out that when a bishop's office is 100% confidential, victims and even perpetrators are more likely to open up. And when they trust that that conversation's safe, bishops have a better chance of persuading that person to self-report and get help before it's too late. I learned this at the FAIR conference from a lawyer who works directly on the church's abuse cases and showed that clergy penitent privilege is not about propping up institutions. It is always about protecting children. I know this is going to sound crazy, but when
There's the loop. Yeah. Well, that's causing a lot of controversy, that particular video. Your thoughts about it, guys? I mean, she cites it, you know, the problem is that she's so sure. It says actually this, but then she cites it to the lawyer who does, you know, represent the church. But then the huge finish about, you know, how this is not about propping up institutions. It's about protecting kids like it always has been, including those 2 kids in Bisbee, Arizona, huh, Jasmine?
And she says studies show, right? Anytime somebody says studies show, the other thing she said is has a better chance of persuading the perpetrator to perhaps, again, just too many variables. There is no straight line by which a victim is going to get some help and relief. It's all too variable.
There's a piece of truth here. I've stuck my neck out on this issue before and gotten tons of flack for it.
You have.
She makes the valid point that she makes is that when everyone's mandatory reporting, but no one's trained on what that looks like, lots of false reports come in. And there is data out there that suggest that having mandatory reporting across the board ends up with the victims actually taking on more trauma. And there's lots of reasons for that. But one of them is that the system doesn't work. The system doesn't fix things. And part of that problem is that there are lots of false reports. There's lots of other issues that add to it. But think about what she's saying. She's saying that when a person sits down with a bishop and admits to blatant sexual abuse, that because other people are reporting mom in the waiting room yelling at her kid and it's borderline and they don't really consider that a true report, it's a false report, that the bishop sitting down with the person actually taking a real sexual abuse confession, him not reporting it makes everything better. And that's just not true. I would say the system has an issue. The system doesn't do very well at training mandatory reporters to what to report and what not to report, or where to draw the line. And some people want to be really safe and not draw
You better be really safe or you're going to get charged with a felony. So you've got to report anything and everything that even comes remotely close to sounding like it.
Right. Which is a product of the system. And what she's trying to say, because even when I made the argument about mandatory reporting having some hiccups that maybe the results aren't what we think they are, I said point blank that the church needs to be mandatory reporters because I don't trust lay clergy to make any kind of decision. They need to say something. The helpline is designed to protect the church first. We know that. So that doesn't work. That's going to reduce liability for LDS Corp. That is not designed to prioritize the well-being of victims.
Ironic that if I'm correct, this is the guy who is the fixer who goes out there first as soon as he hears the reports to try and fix it with a undisclosed sum and an NDA. And I think that's what he is in charge of. And yet he's the one who's giving this information at FAIR conference.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. So the mandatory reporting is an issue because you have lay clergy being told, compounded by being told by a helpline that prioritizes reducing the liability of LDS Corporation. And then you expect when you add those two numbers together that you end up with something beneficial. That makes no sense.
By the way, let me just connect these points because I think it's clear that on the end of the line, when they get the report from the bishop who now has had a confession made to him, okay, or other source, but a confession made to him, and it goes up there, and now the church through the helpline knows about this instance, so they know where to go. They get early notification. This is their early warning system, so they can get an attorney such as Austin out on the first airplane to wherever this place is and have a meeting with him, probably in the church building, where they can use that pressure on them to try and conclude this case and never have it even see the light of day. Okay, so the next story. Oh, wait a second. This is some of the, what would you call it? The controversy caused by Jasmine Rapley. Colby Kevin, who may or may not be some rando, says this.
Kolabi.
Oh, Kalabi. Thank you. This is right after Jasmine had said, here is some helpful information until the full presentation is released. And then there's some links. Colby Kevin says, this is a lie and a really disgusting one at that. The studies you've linked to have absolutely nothing to do with the claims in your video, too. So you clearly have no idea what you're talking about. But hey, a guy who helped set up the abhorrent helpline told you the conclusion you wanted to hear, so I guess that's good enough. There are some good apologetics, some bad apologetics, and then there's this level, which is beyond disgusting. That's what Colby Kevin has to say to Jasmine Rapley. I don't know if it's still there. It may still be there, but I wanted to do a screen grab just in case. And here's something else that is absolutely horrifying. This is a person who agrees with Jasmine Rapley and is emblematic of a large part of this multifaceted problem. Phil Frisbee Jr. says, I wonder how many of these negative comments are from men who have served as bishops or a bishop's counselor. I served as a counselor for over 7 years with 2 bishops. I have seen my bishop use his gift of discernment to root out false accusations before the innocent were harmed by those false accusations. Your thoughts, Rebecca?
Sorry, I had to laugh. Gift of discernment. Sorry, I'm being snarky. No, that's very interesting because to me that says, yeah, the bishop said, yeah, I don't believe the person that came in and talked to me. So I don't think that the person you're accusing did anything. So nothing else to see here, right? Of course, in some cases that may be the case, but in other cases, that gift of discernment, no, the child or the woman, the person that's talking to you about abuse, it's really happening to them. And you may not believe it because that nice gentleman sitting over there on the pew, he would never do anything like that, right? And your gift of discernment tells you that. So this is a very problematic statement here. Anytime somebody reports something, you should turn it over to people that really know what's going on. Let's leave the gift of discernment, put that in quotes, where it belongs. And that's talking to teenagers about whether they masturbate or not.
It is not the bishop's job to figure out who's telling the truth. Exactly. What do you think, Bill, about this one?
My thoughts are on the screen. Discernment. We've already shown.
What does it mean when you put things in just various capitals and various small letters?
Yeah, basically like discernment. Sure. Discernment doesn't work. It doesn't work because bishops and stake presidents are called who create abuse. We've had 70s and apostles and presidents of the church who blatantly lie. We've had financial fraud with the SEC. I mean, these guys can do whatever they want and claim that God talks to them, and it's just a free pass. So, Phil, I hear you. I served as a bishop. I was just doing it on my best common sense and reason. And I feel sorry for the folks who don't have as much common sense and reason.
Okay, so finally, I'm reporting here. There's still some more story. This is finally for me. Jacob Hansen's taking a break. He posted this. Hey, everyone. So it's likely that in the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks, my content output might slow down. I am a business owner and am facing some significant changes/challenges in my company that are going to require a lot of my time and possibly some jail time. No, I added that part. I fully anticipate that everything will work out well and this will be temporary. Still, the reality is I don't make a living on YouTube and my ability to do the channel is predicated on my business being able to support my family, who are always my first priority. I just wanted to make you all aware, just in case you notice a bit of a slowdown in the coming weeks. I love and appreciate you all. I guess that includes me. So anyway, I think we all want to wish Jacob Hansen the best. I think it has to do with Hawaii real estate rental property or property management business that he has with another fellow. So anyway, yeah. Any thoughts by you, Rebecca? Do you know anything about this this business he has?
I do. I know that I've read some things about it before, but I have blocked it out and I can't remember. I do understand that if your podcast is not your livelihood and, there's a livelihood that's supporting your ability to podcast, I'm in that scenario. You do have to make sure that all your ducks in a row are in a row there, but it usually, when somebody makes a statement like that and says, what did he say? I have all the confidence that things will work out. When you say that, it kind of is a little bit of a red flag that there might be some problems and issues. So we wish him the best. I hope he can sort everything out, because there's a lot of news dropping right about now. He can't take a break now. There's a lot of stuff coming out.
Yes. And if anything happens that's newsworthy, we'll cover it here. But anyway, other than that, I'm not going to say anything more about this at the present time, though I might on this Friday's Mormonism After Dark.
He did put something out yesterday.
What did he put out yesterday?
1 day ago, Catholic apologist gets fact-checked on Mormon beliefs, featuring shameless poppery. 11,000 views 1 day ago. Maybe he had that pre-recorded. Who knows?
Jacob Hansen fact-checking anybody is
that's strange. Yeah, he ought to fact-check the church. Start there, maybe.
He could fiction check people with the best of them.
Yeah, he does that well.
He could be a fiction checker.
Fiction checker.
It almost sounds lewd.
It does.
Fiction checking in the first degree. Oh, so whose story is next? I think this is this you, Bill?
This is. So Salt Lake Tribune, Mormon Land, their podcast. They also had a little bit of an article as well. Mormon Land tattoos, even for Latter-day Saints, can be personal and sacred and now acceptable. The Salt Lake Tribune's Mormon Land podcast is talking tattoos, and not the way you might expect. They're saying that ink can be personal, even sacred, and for more and more Latter-day Saints, it's becoming acceptable. That's not a little tweak in tone. That's a seismic shift from decades of hardline condemnation. And if you've been around the church long enough, you know exactly how far this is from what leaders used to preach. Back in October 2000, President Gordon B. Hinckley stood.
I was there.
You were there. Stood at the pulpit and warned fathers to caution your sons against tattoos. He called them graffiti on the temple of the body, saying he couldn't understand why anyone would want to disfigure their skin. This wasn't just gentle advice. It was an outright moral framing that equated tattoos with vandalizing God's property. The talk there's on the right, and the main key quote from that talk there posted below. And if that wasn't strong enough, in that same conference, Hinckley told young women that the time will come when tattooed youth will regret it. This was in the talk, Your Greatest Challenge, Mother. He painted a vivid picture of their future, looking at a constant reminder of their foolishness unless they went through a costly and painful removal of the tattoo. The subtext, tattoos weren't just bad taste. They were permanent evidence of your rebellion against God. And if that wasn't enough, the message kept rolling. In the early 2000s, church magazines and manuals hammered home the same theme. A tattoo is graffiti on the temple of the body. Missionary candidates with tattoos were sometimes benched. And the official True to the Faith guide told members, if you have a tattoo, you wear a constant reminder of a mistake. You might consider having it removed. Ink wasn't just discouraged, it was a spiritual liability. So there's the Ensign article that it showed up in. Tattoos and your mission.
Yeah, tattoos were one of those few things that actually were going to survive the resurrection.
Yeah, they were. March, yeah,
that and holes in your hands and feet.
Those two.
No.
Every hair on your head will be replaced, though, in spite of the fact that you've lost all the hairs on your head 1,000,000 times over. That's a lot of hair on your head when it all comes to be.
Don't burst my bubble, Bill.
You want it all back. So this was back in March 2006 in the Liahona. I know the Ensign is now the Liahona. Again, high demand fundamentalist religions change the names of things all the time. It used to be the Liahona, and then it was the whatever kids magazine, and then it became the Spanish magazine became the Liahona, and we had the English one was the Ensign, and then the English Ensign became the Liahona because these guys have to keep all the chairs on the deck of the Titanic moving. But this was the actual Liahona, and then True to the Faith down there in the bottom right. It was in that manual as well. Other apostles kept the temple graffiti metaphor alive. Boyd K. Packer said, do not decorate your body with tattoos. Stay away from that. And our good friend David A. Bednar compared it to finding spray paint on a holy building, telling members not to deface or disfigure our personal temples. The language was absolute. Tattoos weren't neutral choices. They were desecrations. And there's the two talks those came from. Fast forward to today. And the explicit bans are gone. In 2022, the church released a new For the Strength of Youth guide, and that's in that bottom left there. And if you were to read that, it says questions and answers. What is the Lord's standard on dress, grooming, tattoos, and piercings? I'll just note the old For Strength of Youth manual up top left. Do not disfigure yourself with tattoos or body piercings. Young women, if you desire to have your ears pierced, remember this one, wear only one pair of earrings. Now, what do they say? The Lord's standard is for you to honor the sacredness of your body, even when that means being different from the world. Let this truth and the Spirit be your guide as you make decisions, especially decisions that have lasting effects on your body. Be wise and faithful and seek counsel from your parents and leaders. In other words, do whatever the hell you want, just be guided by the Spirit. That's a big shift from what it used to be.
And always let your conscience be your guide.
So what happened? There's been no revelation announced, no public mea culpa. The change is in tone and enforcement. And instead of a rules list, leaders now use principles language and let members make their own choices. And in the pews, tattoos have shifted from a mark of disobedience to a conversation starter. It even leads to some convert Mormons becoming sort of Mormon famous because of all the tattoos they have. Here's a few tattoos that some Latter-day Saints seem to have gotten. Temple, CTR, Latter-day Saint. This is my favorite one. The bottom line, leaders once framed tattoo. This guy has the back that's made for all of the past leaders of the church.
And several more.
And several. He does have space.
Number 20.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, we all know the prophets have got your back. So now we have the actual visual evidence of that. There it is.
You keep heading right down to the butt crack, don't you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh
I don't
my
want to know
gosh.
what's lower. I mean, are those the 70s? Does it keep going down? I don't want to know.
David Bednar's down there somewhere. Future David Bednar. I know exactly where he belongs.
Don't forget the women's section, the women's leadership.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's on the spirit side of the body. That's the bottom line. Leaders once framed tattoos as moral vandalism, permanent mistakes, and possible roadblocks to service in the kingdom. Today, the handbook tone is quieter, the public conversation is softer, and the cultural norm says, it depends. It's one more example of the church quietly rewriting the social rules while acting like nothing has really changed. And for a faith that prides itself on being the same yesterday, today, and forever, well, that's a pretty big pivot. What do you guys think?
I was just thinking it's a pretty big pivot.
It is a pretty big pivot.
Or is it pivot or divot?
Divot's the thing you leave the hole in during golf games. By the way, for those who want a golf tip, you should be leaving your divot right immediately in front of your golf ball, not behind it. You want to strike the ball swinging downward. But
I think that guy probably has a pretty big divot.
This is he does right on the small of his back. He's got one, a little dimple there that definitely could be called a divot. But this is a pivot, RFM. This is a large shift from where we once were to some other place. The past is a foreign country. They do things.
No, it's got strange
That's
divots
the
there.
key. I think that's the
Are
key
you
right
blushing,
there.
Rebecca?
What?
Are you blushing?
No, I'm not blushing. You know what trouble I had
Why
getting
aren't you
home today. I'm
blushing?
still
Have you no
overheated.
morals?
No, that's not immoral. What I was going to say is saying it's a foreign country. I believe that's the key there. Now I'm speaking as a person that couldn't even take a tattoo out of my Cracker Jack box and put it on my little 6-year-old arm because, that was a victory for Satan or whatever it was. I was not allowed to do that. Still don't have pierced ears because that was also defiling my temple.
Wait a second. Those are clip-ons?
Yeah, I don't have pierced ears. The Lamanites started to pierce themselves. You are not allowed, little Rebecca, to ever get them pierced. And by that point, I had so many clip-on earrings that I know it's really obscure, but that is a strange fact about me. I do not have pierced ears. I've thought about going to get them pierced and making it a whole Mormonish episode,
Yeah.
maybe it would go viral, as I'm screaming.
If there's a lot of blood, yeah.
Yeah, it would be. Anyway, my point is, I believe much like tank top garments, these new relaxed rules are perhaps to accommodate people of, in other countries where it's the norm to have, something that expresses your ethnicity or it's cultural. Do you know what I mean? Something like that. In fact, I came across a story when I was doing a short about this topic. It was Elder Condi, and he had called someone in an African country to be like a stake president. And he said, you're going to have to do something about that tattoo. The man had a cultural tattoo on his hand. He said, you're going to have to cover that when you talk to the youth, because that's not a good example. The next time he saw this gentleman, he had a huge bloody bandage around his hand. And Elder Condi said, what? He said, well, I didn't have time to have it removed nicely. I just had it cut out. And I wear this, these horrific stories.
Well, I hope they didn't get infected.
I know.
I'm just glad. I thought he was going to cut his whole hand off and,
no, that would be extreme. No, but I do feel it's like tank top garments where, they have to make concessions for areas where that's just the norm, and that's not going to fly the other way. I do predict that someday we'll just be tattooing the garment marks on us. I've always thought that's the easiest solution, or a little temporary Cracker Jack tattoo that you just put on once a week. How easy.
And then you could renew your temple covenants every week, like the sacrament. I'm sorry, Bill. Is this your story still?
You had just one more slide. I just want to note what you guys are just hitting on. I made a few notes of ones you guys didn't mention. So first off, women can work outside the home and become auxiliary presidents, having done the more faithful hard thing, right? We had that thing happen a while back. You can have tattoos all over your body. You can have more than one earring anywhere you want. You can wear garments that allow you to wear any piece of clothing, and faith not to be healed is the better of the two, juxtaposed against faith to be healed. This was the final slide. This is on the church's website, tattooing and body piercing, an overview. Our bodies are a gift from God, a blessing we receive because we were righteous in the premortal life. The scriptures compare the body to a temple of God, and we should respect our bodies as we would a temple. President Nelson has said, and then he says all this, I stand in awe of the miracle of the human body. It is a magnificent creation, essential to our gradual ascent toward our ultimate divine potential. We cannot progress without it. In giving us the gift of a body, God has allowed us to take a vital step toward becoming more like him. Your body is your personal temple, created to house your eternal spirit. Your care of that temple is important. It never answers the question, which is the big title of the whole article is tattooing and body piercing. And then in the overview, they don't really say anything specific about tattooing and body piercing. Just the temple, take care of it. And as people have pointed out, the temple has artwork on it. The temple has beautiful windows. The temple has a huge, gigantic spire that stands out and offends everyone around.
Thank you.
Tattoos aren't any different than a temple, what it does. So I guess you're good to go.
And once again, because there's no Gordon B. Hinckley in there anymore, once again, President Nelson has triumphed over Gordo.
That's it. 0-1. And I have to say, when you just gave that list, Bill, working outside the home, tattoo, everything on there is what they used to tell us we were a trampy hoe if we did that, right? Piercings and tattoos and working in the workplace. It's so interesting how things have changed.
You still have to pay 10% of your gross in tithing, though. That
never changes.
That will never. That is one eternal round right there.
Yeah,
exactly.
It really is amazing. I mean, Gordon B. Hinckley wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
We all here, right, on the panel were members of the church when he was the president.
Yep.
And yet, one after another, President Nelson is upending Gordon B. Hinckley's teachings.
You only have to go back 2 guys, Monson, Hinckley.
Yeah, you could even call it going back 1 guy, but still, it's that recent.
Yeah, but that's how it's supposed to be. I learned being on a podcast with Jacob Hansen on Steve Heineker's program that you only pay attention to what's being said now, here and now. Actually, literally today or this minute is all that matters from the prophet. What happened yesterday, last year, last decade, none of that applies. It's right now. And that's the whole point of having a living prophet.
So they can make it up as they go along.
Well, we don't say that part. You know what? I was going to say, RFM, can we please skip forward to Bill's story and then my final story?
We
This
can
one
do
will
whatever
take a
you
little
want.
more time, and it's an awesome one. So if we can just quickly skip that, I will cover that
Whoa.
next week when
What is
I'm in
that
charge.
about?
Well,
What is
no,
it?
don't give
Mushroom.
it away. This is an
Sorry.
amazing story, and
Oh,
I want to
sorry.
give it
Okay.
the time that it needs. So
Is
please,
this where you want me to be?
no, one more.
No, sorry.
There, Bill's story. Nope, Bill's story. One more back there.
Here we go.
Bill's story. There we go.
All right. I'll jump into it. So this is a really quick one. This was in the magazine called Financial Review. Mormon Church's $490 million spending spree exposes trade deal blind spot. Greg Barrett, senior writer with the Financial Review, wrote this. And it's important to know that what I'm about to read to you is in Australian dollars. This is an Australian article. And just note that 100 Australian dollars equals 65, just a little over 65 US dollars. So Australia's agricultural scene just got a wake-up call. In less than 6 months, the Mormon Church's farmland reserve, we know it's coming, don't we? Bought nearly $490 million worth. That's going to end up being about 300 million or so of US dollars worth of farmland, including the massive Worrell Creek aggregation near Mugindi for $350 million, the North Star aggregation near Moree for $68 million, plus Kentucky farms at Forbes and the Carnarvon aggregation at Gunada. I'm giving up. These are places in Australia. You can go find them on the map for $38 million and $32 million respectively. And the kicker, they're not done. Agents are actively hunting for more. The LDS Church, if you want to know why it saved all this money, it wasn't to help the poor. It wasn't for the second coming. It was so it could be the largest landholder next to China in the U.S. in the entire world. The backlash was immediate. Nationals leader David Littleproud flagged the spree as a glaring blind spot in the Australia-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. It'll be referred to later as the FTA, warning that these kinds of acquisitions should trigger serious scrutiny, but apparently don't. From a few farm sales to nearly $500 million of foreign ownership in just months. That's not a trickle of investment. That's a tidal wave slipping through loopholes. So here's the takeaway. A foreign religious institution with deep pockets is quietly reshaping Aussie farmland ownership while policymakers scramble to catch up. The question now is whether the FTA, the Free Trade Agreement, will get a rewrite, or if Australian control over its own productive land will remain a casualty of complacency. And I'll just note, we're in this country dealing with that with China. China's buying tons of farmland, buying lots of it near military installations and whatnot. So it also ventures into the realm of sort of protecting your country against threats. Even if they seem friendly now, you wouldn't want another country to own half of you. And
when the Chinese move here, we can all move to Australia.
I know we will. We'll have plenty of room there to go.
For Mormon
on church land. Yeah. What do you guys think of the church? It is nonstop buying land like crazy.
Yeah, and I don't think people understand how much land, just like we can't comprehend how much money, we also can't comprehend how much land. We can make comparisons to it with, Bill Gates level, or they're the 5th highest land owner in the United States. Even that doesn't compute to what they're doing on a global stage. But you can't do that in a vacuum. Eventually, like Australia is finally going, wait, what? There's got to be some kind of cap on it. Then again, how do you cap, $300 billion? I don't know, but they're doing it. And I honestly don't know why, except for a place to park your money. Someone in the chat made the comment, Jesus already owns all this land. Why do you have to buy it? So, but yeah, they're doing it, but we can't. I think the faithful people are proud. They're proud of the money. They're proud of the land. They're proud because they somehow feel it's going to trickle back to them someday. I can't explain that feeling, but I know a lot of people feel that way. And that's not what is going to happen, but they feel pride.
It reminds me of I'll paraphrase a famous statement about Alexander the Great. For the Mormon Church wept, and the Mormon Church wept, for there were no more worlds left to buy.
Oh, tear to my eye.
Yeah, poor Mormon Church.
Poor Mormon church. That's right. So I skipped my one story. That's awesome. I'm going to do that next week just so that I can give it the time that it needs. This last story that I have is old news, but it's new news to me. And I think it might be new news to some of you. And we did spend a lot of time talking about church lawyers. So I think this is very relevant. So this will show me this will show you my thought process of how I kind of arrive at these strange, quirky stories. So I was looking at Faithful Social Media, and I saw somebody say, I'm in a bishopric. A gentleman in the ward came to my bishop and said, he's starting a new business. Can you dedicate the building where the new business is going to be? And the counselor, the person asking the questions, like, I don't think that's appropriate. What do y'all think? So I'm reading through the comments, and some people are like, yeah, that's not appropriate. Other people are like, well, and then somebody said, well, President Oaks did that to the Curtin McConkie building. And I went, what? You can see it right there, right? President Oaks dedicated the Curtin McConkie offices, so why not? So that sent me down a rabbit hole while I was at work. Oops, but how can you not try to figure out what is going on here, right? So I looked it up. It was easy as finding a Deseret News article. This happened in 2012, long before the newscast, or we would have reported on it. Elder Dallin H. Oaks dedicates the new home of Utah's largest law firm. And for those of you that may not know, I'm assuming everyone does, maybe not Never Mormons, Curtin McConkie is the law firm to the LDS Church. That's
how they got around it.
What?
That's how they got around it. They called it the home.
Yeah. Oh, new home. You know what? I didn't even catch that. Very good. That could be it. Here's a picture of President Oaks. He is dedicating the new home. Yeah. You know what? You have solved the mystery right there. So I just started to look into this because I thought, was it really a dedication? Did he literally say a dedicatory prayer? For those of you who may not understand what that is, usually reserved for a temple. It's a special prayer. And I had to look up, on the church website, that's you can dedicate a temple, a meeting house, a seminary building. You can dedicate a home or a grave, but it's definitely a very special ceremony, a certain special prayer that you say to kind of consecrate the building for the use of the Lord and the gospel purposes. Yes, Bishop Bill.
It seems like they wouldn't dedicate some other entity's private company. I know that Curtin and McConkie are the legal representatives of the LDS Church, but this would seem to indicate that Curtin and McConkie is actually a subsidiary of LDS Corp. And I didn't know that until just this many years old.
Yeah. No, I wondered that, honestly, because, in the initial post I saw, this guy just started a business and was moving into a mall, dedicate the mall, and not appropriate. But if you have some kind of connection and ownership to this home, Curtin McConkie, you're going to be able to dedicate that. So I kind of went through that, the times and places that they're dedicated. And President Oaks, of course, has dedicated multiple temples, right? And let's add this one to the list. So it says Dallin Oaks, he was among friends Thursday afternoon, surrounded by legal professionals at the new home. Now that you've pointed that out, RFM, I can't help but see that. This is exactly what they're doing. Of Utah's largest law firm, Elder Oaks, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Quorum of the 12, officially welcomed Curtin McConkie to City Creek Center. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just some kind of nicety. He offered a dedicatory prayer at the firm's new building. So it wasn't just some kind of nice ceremony where he showed up. He used the power of his apostolic priesthood, and he dedicated a building for lawyers. No offense, RFM. So he said in the article, he said, lawyers and the legal profession have served humanity ably, responsibly, and effectively throughout our lifetimes and for many generations before us, Elder Oaks told the lawyers gathered in the new office. The continuation of that service, and by that service, he's talking about, lawyers serving humanity aptly, responsibly, and effectively, which is essential to the children of God. The work of the lawyers is essential to the children of God and to the work of the Lord. Depends on the conscientious performance of lawyers like you and law firms like Curtin McConkie. So essential was a word that really, and maybe in the face of all these sexual assault lawsuits, essential, they really are essential. I don't know. What do you guys think about this language around a law firm?
Well, there's so many kinds of law, and it's so easy to find ways in which what he said is completely accurate, whether it's the lawyers necessary for purchase and sale agreements,
That's
blah,
true.
blah, blah,
Good
all
point.
the sorts of things that the church does. And, lawsuits that are made against it, which every company of any size is going to have lawsuits against it for a variety of reasons. And whether they are well-founded or not, you're going to need lawyers to defend you. So I think that the reason it strikes strange is because of all the nefarious things that we already know that church lawyers are doing. And it seems like if the church is going to dedicate a building, it's sure as hell going to dedicate the building in which their law office is. Because if there's one thing the Mormon church holds higher than their temples, it's their law office.
That's true. But think about all the bad advice they got from lawyers. I guess that was before the dedication. So maybe the dedication will stop the bad advice from the lawyers.
This is one of the reasons it's really good to have clients who are in the first stages of dementia, is they're not aware that the advice you're giving them is crap.
Is that how you practiced RFM?
Yeah, basically, I would just, I had a certain age limit below which I would not accept the client.
93, something
Yeah,
like that.
pretty
So
much,
the
yeah.
article goes on to say, during the dedication ceremony, Elder Lance B. Wickman, who is an emeritus general authorities, because you can become emeritus when you're general authority, not an apostle. I learned that from Matt Harris at Sunstone. They praised Curtin McConkie for the work it does for the church for nearly 17 years. It says, it's not really the building that we're dedicating, Elder Wickman said. It's really us in our devotion, in our service, giving the best that we have to give in our professional capacity, realizing that in doing so, we are not just representing another client, but we are representing the Church of Jesus Christ himself. So, boy, that really gives you some weight and importance to this.
You know how Admiral Kirk says, what does God need with a spaceship? Well, I got another one. RFM says, what does Jesus need with a lawyer?
That's it. But look at this picture. There Jesus is with all of his lawyers standing around him. So, of course, I had my friend Ron. He can just pull these out of a hat in a second. There's so many scriptures about lawyers, right? Sorry, RFM. You might want to cover your eyes.
Let me know when you're done, okay?
I don't know. I'm not going to read them, but everybody knows that the lawyers in the scriptures have a negative connotation. So, he is leaving. Oh my gosh, I was not going to read them. That's so funny. So then it got me to thinking, okay, what other major buildings have opened downtown? That's so funny. And I thought, oh my God, don't tell me that they actually did a dedicatory prayer on City Creek. Boy, wouldn't that have been amazing if I could have announced that? But I did not find anything like that. I did find that Brigham Young said a dedicatory prayer in 1869 on ZCMI, where I used to shop when I was in college because it was still open. And as far as the City Creek Center, it opened on the same block, Crossroads Plaza, and it wasn't a dedicatory prayer, but it was a ceremony. Of course, the famous words, "Let's go shopping."
Right.
I consider "Let's go shopping" a dedicatory. I say that every time I enter the mall. That's exactly
Well, on the
right.
other hand, Mormons bless all kinds of crap that they're about to eat. So.
And they do. And they always say, we thank thee for this day. That's all they say. Every prayer starts like that. We thank thee for this day. Yeah, it's very interesting. So my last slide here is just, I couldn't help but notice just, again, the juxtaposition. When we talk about temple dedications, this is from the church website. The work of the temples is central to Jesus Christ. All that is learned and done here relates to him. Temples are essential to our Heavenly Father's plan for his children. In the houses of the Lord, we are taught the most important things. We can learn immortality, the knowledge of eternity, essential. And he said the same thing about Curtin McConkie. I already read the first part. The continuation of this service is essential to the children of God and the work of the Lord. So it's kind of on the same par is kind of how I took it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And let me see, did I put these final? No, I didn't. I had some pictures of President Oaks and all the temples that, they're right there. Oh my gosh. He dedicated. And then of course, one of these things is not like the other, or is it? There's the Curtin McConkie building. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Old news, new news. I hadn't heard it before and it was kind of surprising.
I was looking at Beneficial Life while you were talking and I couldn't come up with anything there either.
Oh, yeah, I don't think so. So the law firm is the only building of a, business nature that they did dedicate.
Well, all buildings get dedicated. A lot of buildings get dedicated in a non-religious way. I think Beneficial Life got dedicated back on Veterans Day of 1967, but I don't know about any prayer, or there's nothing to be found that I could find about any prayer.
Right. It's using the priesthood that sets this apart.
Right.
A dedicatory prayer is through the apostolic power of the priesthood. So that's different. That's mighty.
You'd be surprised what you can accomplish if you just raise your hand, Rebecca.
Ooh, don't do that. Don't do that.
Look out. Don't raise that hand at me. So, Bill,
I've
did you
got
have
a-
anything else?
Yeah, I got a little something funny to show everyone. You guys
good.
talked me into this, so I'll just tell a little
Oh
story
my
really
God.
quick.
Oh, the Emmett Kelly story.
All
This
right,
is so
so
funny.
yes, yesterday, so first off, moving into Cedar City, whatever is around this area, I've gotten tons of allergies. The home has had some construction stuff done, so there's been lots of construction dust and all of that. So I have had allergies for 2 weeks nonstop. I built my own Corso Rosenthal box, which is multiple high-end filters, furnace filters taped together with a box fan on top that draws air in through the filters and blows clean air out the top. Wow. Highly recommend. It's a way to build a super efficient HEPA filter for less than $100. Anyway, I say all that to say I've been sneezing. My eyes have been itching. I've been blowing my nose. All my trash cans are full of toilet paper and tissues.
Okay, here I go again.
I get all dry. My lips right now are dry. Yeah, there he goes away. So I found a tube of chapstick, and I took the chapstick and I put it all over my my mouth and a little bit underneath my nose. And I thought, yeah, I'll feel better. This is going to moisturize my skin. I'm going to be good. I walk into the kitchen and I'm talking to my girlfriend, and she's not looking at me, but we're talking and we're going on for maybe 40 seconds, 50 seconds. Finally, she looks over at me and she starts laughing hysterically. This is what she saw. Wait, let me start out by saying it wasn't chapstick. It was SPF 30 lip sunscreen. And so this is what I ended up looking like. This is the picture she took.
I think this picture could get us closed down permanently.
Now I understand why she was laughing like crazy. I had put sunblock all over my face, and I now looked like Emmett Kelly, the clown.
Well, is this where you would normally put chapstick? I mean, it's not Vicks
You're trying to
Vapor Rub.
moisturize all
lip,
around your
it's
skin.
all around my lips that
Yeah.
are dry and
Yeah.
hurt, and my nose underneath my nose.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, I usually just put it on my lips, but I'm
People
crazy
put
about it.
chapstick where you'd be surprised to hear about RFM.
Really?
I'm telling you. Oh yeah.
I just wanted to put a red nose on and just walk with the big shoes. But anyway, just a note to you guys: look at your chapstick closely before you put it on. I was on my way to get my shoes on and head out to some stores. I was going to go to Walmart.
It's a good thing somebody mentioned it.
She said if I would have had time to think it through, I would have not laughed and I would have let you go out there.
I totally would have.
I know you would have.
Except for the fact that you would have called me when you got thrown in jail and I'd have to bail you out.
People would have been looking at me and laughing, and I would have been like, what the hell is going on? But
so what's coming up, everybody? Let's go to you first, Rebecca.
Oh, yes. Mine is always the next night, Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And we have a topic. It's not depressing. It's interesting. Death after deconstruction, a new perspective with our friend Kate Flint. And we're kind of basing it all on an incredibly good book called Being Mortal. And so we're just talking about end of life and how that kind of changes your perspective when you step away from your faith tradition, and how family reacts and feelings that you have. And it was a very interesting discussion. So that's tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on Mormonish.
Well, that's wonderful. On Wednesday on Mormonism Live, as I said earlier, we'll be having Lauren Matthias on the show. She and her husband of Hidden True Crime. Hidden True Crime, a very, very popular true crime show. And she's been covering a whole lot of stuff, a lot of Mormon stuff lately. Mormons have been working overtime to give Lauren crimes, horrible crimes to cover. And then there's some other people who aren't even Mormons as well. She's going to come in. She's going to share some of the highlights of her career, the craziest, strangest, most scary, even funniest types of things that have happened. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I talked to her for about an hour today. She's wonderful. She's very, very articulate, and we're going to have a great time on Friday, on Wednesday. On Friday, boy, we may have Randy Bell on. We may have Randy Bell and Colby Reddish on, and it may be slice and dice time at the old Bronco factory. So I'm not sure I can give any more details about it now, like names to be sliced and diced, but we'll see how that develops over time. It's going to be a lot of fun. Bill, do you have anything that you want to mention before I sign off? And the same for you, Rebecca.
I've got nothing else. That's it for me.
Hearing no objection. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. By the way, please hit like. Do it right now if you haven't done it already. Please hit like on the screen. And also, please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed so you don't miss any of the wonderful issues from Mormon Discussion Podcast, Inc. Also, this streams on Mormon Discussions. It also streams on Mormon-ish because it's a collaborative thing. If you are watching it on Mormon Discussions, please go to Mormon-ish and click like and subscribe there too. And vice versa. If you're watching this on Mormon-ish, please go to Mormon Discussions, hit the like and the subscribe there as well. So we've got all bases covered. Thanks again for watching. Please join us next week for another episode of the Mormon Newscast. Good night, everybody.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.